Hi, I'm actor Ian Champion, and welcome to History of Horror Cinema, my podcast series devoted to the good, bad, and the ugly of horror movie history. Please don't forget to like what you hear and hit subscribe. I have such sights to show you. Murders in the Zoo, 1933. Lionel Atwill's developing identity as Hollywood's locum mad doctor had plenty of scope to be channeled into other situations than simply the laboratory. His insane, all-obliterating supervillain could be plugged into any plot anywhere, given enough motivation and vision. In Murders in the Zoo, Atwill swapped scrubs for safari suits as Eric Gorman, a millionaire philanthropist and big game hunter who snares more than just wild animals for sport. He is terrifyingly in tune with his animal instincts, the blue touch paper of uncontrollable jealousy constantly lit by his girl to murderous ends. We know this right from the start, deep in the Indian jungle, where he hogties a fellow American to teach him a lesson. "And you will never kiss another man's wife," Gorman asserts, with all the confidence of having sewn up the victim's mouth for us to witness in a brutally vivid close-up. You couldn't blame the poor sap for wanting her. After all, Evelyn is played by the lovely Kathleen Burke, alias Lota, the sultry panther woman from Island of Lost Souls, as we've covered earlier. Part of the fun here is how director A. Edward Sutherland relishes every grisly example of Gorman's reaper-like sway through his perceived love rivals, especially when you consider his background was steeped in high-profile comedy. Sutherland was one of the original Keystone Cops, the Senate Studio's spectacularly inept sight gag force of the silent era. Charlie Chaplin directed him in A Woman of Paris, mentoring him into becoming a director himself, which led to his work with W.C. Fields, Laurel and Hardy, later in The Flying Deuces, and Abbott and Costello. Not that there isn't plenty of headroom for amusing comedy in Murders in the Zoo, courtesy of Charlie Ruggles' booze-hound press agent Peter Yates. He functions as a kind of sozzled everyman, reacting with increasing alcoholic bemusement to the absurdity around him. Ruggles enjoyed a hugely prolific career, specializing in comic relief roles across almost 100 features, most notably Bringing Up Baby and his series with Mary Boland. In fact, his light-hearted persona was strong enough to headline his own sitcom, The Ruggles, and a recurring guest spot in TV's The Beverly Hillbillies. As Yates, he blags his way into marketing the municipal zoo, for whom Gorman has been capturing wild animals, assuring the boss that he has been on the wagon for 2 days and 3 weeks. He's as shocked as anyone else that his ideas have any merit, and when not being terrified by the wildlife, constantly puts his foot in it with amusing Freudian and social faux pas. After suggesting a glorified society chimp's tea party to gain the zoo media exposure, he invites the high-class banqueters to put on the partake of the refreshments. Gorman, meanwhile, lets us in on his Darwinian worldview early. Rather than waiting for a climactic parting shot rant, he sees himself reflected in the primal instincts of animals. Their honesty, their simplicity, their primitive emotions. They love, they hate, they kill. Sam Peckinpah might well have related to this. Gorman sees the upcoming meal as a chance to dispatch smooth playboy Roger Hewitt, John Lodge, who genuinely has been plotting to run away with Evelyn since they met on a cruise ship home from India. "I can promise you a really unusual evening," Atwill tells Hewitt with elegantly evil restraint, letting the audience in like Shakespeare's Richard III to his machinations. Subtle venom like this is later fatally injected into Hewitt's leg at the banquet, 2-0 to Gorman. The hunter, though, has reckoned without a worthy opponent, and this appears in the novel sight of Randolph Scott as Dr. Woodford. He is an undeniable novelty in a modern urban setting. Although cast in all types of genres, 60% of Scott's 100-plus movie roles were in westerns. His status as a legendary oter is even name-checked with show-stopping, quasi-religious fervor in Mel Brooks's affectionate parody Blazing Saddles. Though he was at home on the range, he reveals he is no cowboy in the laboratory. Indignant at the suggestion that Hewitt's death was caused by his green mamba, Dr. Woodford discovers the fang width of the bite on Hewitt is too wide to have been from his snake. Clearly, someone has introduced a private Mamba's bill into the proceedings. This we already know by virtue of Evelyn's snooping. She finds a venomous artificial snake head in Gorman's desk drawer. Poison pen letters indeed. Gorman catches her in the act, causing her to spill the beans on her now thwarted plans to leave him for her lover. This scene is a macabre treat for Atwill fans. His reaction is wonderfully malignant and unexpected. No anger, no recrimination. Instead, he perversely woos her with soft, mocking cruelty, seizing and pawing at her sadistically, reframing her repulsion as though it were passion for him. It is electrifying and bubbles with awful undercurrents as to how he must have handled her in private. Sadly, her only escape is as alligator food, feasted upon in ghoulish, water-lashing close-ups by Sutherland. Marshal Woodford, sorry I can't help it, saves the day when he and Atwill take their places for the obligatory tussle in the lab. But this is one horse Gorman cannot tame. His trusty venom is no match for a nick-of-time antitoxin administered to Woodford by his partner, the smoky-voiced and beguilingly sunny Gail Patrick. Gorman's suave composure at last deserts him, and after releasing all the animals on the run, it rather aptly remains for a friendly boa constrictor to get up close and personal with him. Murders in the Zoo feels more like a second-string B picture than a main feature, yet it's highly entertaining, not least in the dexterous balancing act by Sutherland between laughs and horror, making a fine showcase for Charlie Ruggles and Lionel Atwill. Secret of the Blue Room, 1933. In 1933, Universal released the murder mystery film Secret of the Blue Room. For the most part, it's a pretty average potboiler, which is a shame as it starts out with a promising premise, but then is wrapped up with the lamest of conclusions. Based on the 1932 German film Geheimnis des Blauen Zimmers, it was later given 2 remakes. Murder in the Blue Room, the 1944 version, became a comedy with songs, which is apt as you certainly can't take this plot seriously. Basically, it centers around 3 suitors to Irene, the comely 21-year-old daughter of wealthy Robert Van Heldorf, Lionel Atwill, who's given very little else of substance to do other than exposition. Irene is played by Gloria Stewart, whose longevity of career I'll cover in The Old Dark House. The trio of hopefuls are Tommy, played by William Janney, Onslow Stevens as Frank, later Dr. Edelman in House of Dracula, and Walter, Paul Lucas, who won an Oscar in 1943 opposite Bette Davis in Watch on the Rhine. Frank is a go-getting reporter always on the lookout for the big scoop, and Walter is a suave Hungarian-accented naval officer. You can tell this as he spends the entire film wearing his naval uniform even though he's off duty. Tommy, however, is an insufferably wet little dweeb. He declares his undying love for Irene on her 21st birthday, in exactly the kind of face-palmingly desperate manner that no self-respecting woman would find attractive. She has the grace to humor him, but for us there's only so much tiresome, you wouldn't want to be with someone like me, fishing that the viewer can take. Fortunately, he presents his own solution, a wager to prove he has the necessary courage to be worthy of her. The 3 men will spend a night each in the family mansion's notorious Blue Room. Von Heldorf has reluctantly shared the grisly history of the room, which so far has mysteriously claimed the lives of his sister, who inextricably fell out of its window into the moat, his brother, who died of a gunshot wound there from a weapon never recovered, and we all know what curiosity did to the cat. All the victim occupants' lives are claimed at 1 a.m. "This is better than any story I could write," says Frank glumly. He needn't be so hard on himself. He hasn't seen the rest of the film. Tommy is the first to take the bet, and Irene demonstrates a peculiar way of showing her admiration for how far he will go for her. "Thank goodness, I can be a coward with a clear conscience." Thanks for that. No wonder he vanishes. When it's Frank's turn, he manages to get shot off screen while sitting at the piano. As the body count rises, von Heldorf is strangely reluctant to bring in the police. Nevertheless, in comes Commissioner Forster, Edward Arnold. He subjects the household to a grindingly sluggish third-act interrogation that kills the pace. Amongst the suspects we get a better sense of the gruff, furtive butler Paul, Robert Barrett, and Mary, Elizabeth Patterson, the caustic and sneaky housekeeper who is all too keen to pin the murders on him. Von Heldorf seems to earn our allegiance by confessing to the cops that his brother is actually alive, and there's a family secret. that Irene is actually his brother's daughter and not von Helldorf's. This is either crucial or irrelevant to what happens next. Guess which one? Mercifully, Forster's inquiries turn from Prozac to proactive. He teams up with Walter to fool the killer into revealing himself and the sliding wall compartment he used to enter and murder his victims. Would you believe it was Tommy all along? Me neither. It's utter bullshit. Supposedly he heard about the Blue Room's history and simply decided to use it as a convenient setting to dispatch his love rivals. Leaving aside our incredulity at this ridiculous revelation, we never get an explanation as to who killed von Helldorf's sister or the detective. Walter closes the double doors on the case, and the closing sight of the Universal airplane chugging round the globe to the familiar strains of Swan Lake, used for all their horror film themes at this point, leaves us none the wiser. Thanks for listening, and if you like what you've just heard, don't forget to click so, and please hit subscribe. If you build it, they will come.